Moving on.
All right, let's do that. In the past few months, believe it or not, US real estate market has started to come back to life.
This is amazing, thanks in part to foreign buyers. Near the top of that list are Chinese buyers, many of them making all cash purchases.
Yeah, indeed. Christine Romans checks out the buyers in action in Hong Kong and what they're snapping up.
It's a Saturday afternoon in this Hong Kong hotel, and Chinese investors are enjoying a catered lunch while bidding on properties half a world away. Spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on properties they may never set foot in. The Chinese are now second only to the Canadians when it comes to buying real estate in the United States. But when they buy big, spending on average $425,000 per property. And most of the time, they pay all cash, preferring big cities like New York and their suburbs. So what's the draw?
Upside potential, surroundings. I mean, we've got friends and folks who live there, so it's sort of keeping up with the Joneses.
For Andrew Chan, a U.S. home is a place to stay on vacation and quite simply a deal. Real estate prices in China are sky high. That means its citizens are cutting checks without stepping foot inside a property on the other side of the planet. Expositions like this one for a development in Florida have become a normal event. This exposition hosted by the O'Neill Group and Noble Apex.
We expect that the U.S. economy can continue to grow. One way or another, the property price will still go up.
In the United States, anyone with cash can buy real estate regardless of citizenship. A very simple contract is all it takes, something new for Chinese citizens.
There's a kind of security to owning property in the U.S. that still doesn't exist in China. It's only recently that the Chinese government expropriated property fairly regularly. I think that means the people who have means are still nervous about their ability to hang on to those means if they invest in China.
53% of reported purchases by Chinese buyers were in California. Why? Well, because it's closer. As a result, the market has changed. Seasoned L.A. broker Sally Forster Jones has had to change with it.
I've spent some time in China, just meeting a lot of the potential Chinese buyers to get an understanding of what types of property they like. They are buying anywhere from the lower end in the Los Angeles marketplace, which is somewhere around $1 million, to the high end, $20 million.
Andrew Chan has his eyes on a few homes across the U.S.
There's a lot of information that are provided, yes. It's very informative.
But he's not ready to buy just yet. When he finally is, experts say China's restrictions on transferring money out of the country will be relatively easy to navigate. Christine Roman, CNN, New York.
Coffee. Coffee now!
We plan to discuss Syria today. And while we appreciate China's support for a political solution, the only solution we believe is ultimately available and possible. We do have differences between our nations and have disagreed sharply over how the international community should respond to the Syrian regime's use of chemical weapons. With negotiations ongoing at the Security Council, we look forward to China playing a positive, constructive, important role.
China's Navy marked its 60th anniversary today with a big show of its newest warships and weaponry off the eastern coast of Qingdao. Headlining the naval parade of Chinese and foreign vessels, including the U.S. Navy missile destroyer, the USS Fitzgerald, were 4 Chinese submarines, 2 of them nuclear and never seen before in public.
I think a big step for the Chinese in terms of displaying their nuclear submarine force to an international audience.
But with expanding military might comes a more assertive stance.
Our economy is growing. We should have a Navy that corresponds to our size.
And concern.
It's important as the Chinese Navy grows that, again, that we discuss that, we interact, and we understand what each other's intentions are and what their goals and ambitions are.
In December, China began taking part in anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia, the farthest its naval ships have ever traveled. Last month, Chinese vessels harassed an American surveillance ship in the South China Sea, claiming the ship, the Impeccable, was conducting illegal surveillance activities in its territory. And speculation runs high that the Chinese People's Liberation Army, or PLA, is building an aircraft carrier, heightening concerns about China's military objectives.
I believe that if an aircraft carrier is introduced by the PLA Navy, it doesn't change the balance significantly. The real issue is what is the purpose of the aircraft carrier?
But China says its aims are purely defensive.
The goal of developing our Navy is to protect our maritime rights, survival and development rights. This is no threat to anyone.
These anniversary celebrations are being billed as the Naval Olympics. It's all part of China's effort to reassure the world that its military intentions are friendly and transparent.
In another rare gesture of openness, sailors from China, the U.S., and other countries exchange visits to one another's naval ships. But for some, it's not quite enough yet.
Because they're very open in showing the ships, it does not mean that you know how they want to operate, how they're going to spend the next defense budget, of course, and how large it is going to be.
Maintaining pressure on the Chinese that they will be above board with their military designs. Adrian Mong, NBC News, Qingdao, China.
Professor Xia has been an outspoken critic of China's ruling Communist Party. He shows me a letter signed by over 100 American academics protesting against what they call a politically motivated move to silence him.
The major reason is for the past few years have kept criticizing the government and the party. And I always promote constitutional democracy, rule of law, and freedom of speech, freedom of publication, freedom of assembly, all those things. I don't think that I do anything wrong.
Professor Xiao's sacking comes as other critics are being targeted by the state. One of China's most popular bloggers arrested, made to appear on state TV, apparently under pressure, he praises a government crackdown on the internet. In the staged interview, he says online criticism of the government can lead to social chaos. Despite censorship, the internet poses a threat to the state. With 500 million people now online, the numbers rising thanks to cheap smartphones. More and more people are able to share views, ideas, opinions with just a few taps of their phone. The government's old monopoly on information is well and truly broken. And emerging opposition is increasingly being seen and heard. The greatest fear of China's leaders, the power of social media to bring people onto the streets, as it did last year at this demonstration against a chemical plant in eastern China. In a video smuggled out of prison, a jailed lawyer calls for people to stand up and speak out. The authorities say they have to take action against what they call illegal rumours. Professor Xia says China's leaders are treating criticism as a crime. Angus Walker, ITV News, Beijing.
Well, the U.S. and China, two world powers with a very shaky relationship. A study by the Brookings Institution shows that as China's influence grows, they see the U.S. as a declining power. But they also believe that the U.S. will do anything in its power to make sure that it stays on top. Now, this comes as the U.S. is shifting their geopolitical focus to the Asia-Pacific region. And just yesterday, 200 U.S. Marines arrived in Darwin, Australia. They are the first of thousands expected to arrive. Now, this is the latest move by the U.S. military to amp up its presence in the region. And China has some concerns with the growing U.S. presence nearby. So, as tension rises, what does the future hold for U.S.-China relations? To talk more about this, Raymond Latta, political economist, joins us now. Welcome, Raymond. So we are seeing that there are suspicions on both sides, but is there one side that seems to be more suspicious?
You know, I don't think it's a question of suspiciousness or distrust, although those are real phenomena, or who distrusts whom more. What's really going on is that there are growing geopolitical tensions between the United States and China. And this is taking place against a backdrop of a profound global economic crisis. That's really what's setting the stage for this. You see over the last 2 decades a decline of the U.S. share of world production, you know, the dollar, its role in international currency markets and its role in the international economy has eroded. And you see the rise of China, not as a socialist society, but as a capitalist power. Since the death of Mao Zedong, China has been a capitalist society. And China's economic clout has grown. It is now the second largest economy in the world. It's the second largest manufacturing exporter. And the renminbi, the Chinese currency, is playing an increasingly important role in the world economy. So there is a shift in relative economic might in the world. The U.S. is still the dominant power, but China's rise is a profound and shaping feature of global geoeconomics, and this now is leading to intensifying geoeconomic tensions between these two powers.
And as well, we are seeing a shift, a military response to this, the U.S. shifting their military might to the Asia-Pacific region, and it's believed it's because they want to amp up presence near China.
Well, you know, I think, you know, again, against the backdrop that I'm setting forth here, yes, this is absolutely true. If you look at the January 12 Pentagon strategy review that was issued in January of this year, you know, it speaks of, quote, a rebalancing of U.S. military assets towards Asia, and it singles out China. This is a reflection of the fact, as I said, of the growing rivalry, economic and geopolitical, between these two powers. And the U.S. imperialism is seeking to compensate for its declining economic strength, you know, by using its military advantage. And what's happening now, as you kind of touched on in the opening to this segment, you know, is very, very significant. The U.S. has expanded its long-term presence, military presence in Asia for the first time since the end of the war in Vietnam. That is, setting up this base in Australia. The U.S. is seeking to strengthen its partnerships and alliances in East Asia. And it is waging what the Wall Street Journal called a few months ago a full court press against China. That is, it's trying to encircle China and tighten that encirclement economically, militarily, and diplomatically. It's insinuating itself into territorial disputes in the South China Seas. And it is, as I said, you know, trying to reassert its hegemonic position in Asia. And China, in turn, is responding to that. But both of these powers are actually seeking to expand their presence and their influence. The U.S. is reasserting its dominant presence, and China is, as a capitalist power in transition to an imperialist power, is expanding its commercial influence, is breaking out into Africa, into Central Asia. Its relative demand for raw materials is greater now than ever before. And this is, again, part of this backdrop, and that rivalry is not in the interest of the people of the world.
So what you're saying is that the U.S., as they kind of surround China in a way, you know, with these new bases that we're seeing pop up in the region, that China is also responding to this.
Yeah, as I said, both of these, you know, the U.S. is the dominant imperialist power in the world, and it is responsible for more suffering and more death and destruction than any power since the end of World War II. And of course, you know, it should be very galling and upsetting to anyone of decency and justice when the U.S. talks about reasserting its strength in Asia. This is where the U.S. waged its war in Vietnam for 10 years and was responsible for the deaths of 2 to 3 million people, the war in Korea, The U.S. was responsible, the CIA was complicit in the deaths of 500,000 people in Indonesia in 1965. So when the U.S. talks about, reasserting or rebalancing or reorienting towards Asia, there is a proven record there that is one of oppression and horror. And China, in turn, is, as I said, as a capitalist power in transition to an imperial power, is engaged in a process of expansion. As I said, economically and militarily, China is stepping up and ramping up its, military spending. The budget in 2012 in China will now be over $100 billion, which makes China the second largest military spender in the world. Of course, this is only 1/7 of U.S. military expenditure.
All right, we have just a very little amount of time left, but we are seeing these tensions rising. Where could this lead ultimately? 10, 15 years? Where is this heading?
Well, I think we see some of the signs and seeds of this right now. This intensifying rivalry could lead to military conflict. I'm not here to make any predictions, but this is, in fact, entirely conceivable. So one, as I said, there is the danger. East Asia is a flashpoint or trigger point of military conflict. And two,
all right.
I think we have
Raymond, we are just simply out of time, but thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on the show. That was Raymond Lada, political.
The United States and China had agreed to continue to coordination at sea. So China had decided to come into the United States and visit Pearl Harbor and to spread cheer, to coordinate exercises at sea through in-port period. So now, with this operation here, we proved that, hey, we can operate together. Now, granted, it's on our turf, it's on our waters, and we're allowing them in, but someone needs to make that step. So we made the step, they've come to us, they see that we're interested, and we truly do have a heart that's open to move forward.
We expect other nations to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and avoid provocative actions. That's why I'm closely watching Russia's military exercises along the Ukrainian border, which they announced, as you know, yesterday. I expect Russia to be transparent about these activities, and I urge them not to take any steps that could be misinterpreted or lead to miscalculation during a very delicate time, a time of great tension.
Hagel's comments came at a news conference after a NATO defense ministers meeting. This after Moscow launched large-scale military exercises involving most units in central and western regions of the country. The maneuvers involved some 150,000 troops, hundreds of tanks, 90 aircraft, and 80 Navy ships. The Russian Defense Ministry has also announced that fighter jets along the country's western borders have been put on combat alert. NATO says it's convinced that the Russian moves have nothing to do with the ongoing events in Ukraine, but that the timing of the drills is, quote, unfortunate. Let's see what Mike Billington thinks. He's from the Executive Intelligence Review, and he joins us from Leesburg. Mike Billington, it's pretty apparent that Putin is mad. And we just heard from the U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel saying that it hopes that it's not going to be provocative, these military drills, and that it wouldn't lead to miscalculations. Where do you see the situation headed?
Well, it's a disgusting hypocrisy. The problem, of course, as everyone knows, is that it's not the Russians who are intervening in the internal affairs of Ukraine. It was the U.S. and NATO. Everybody heard Victoria Nuland's open discussion with Ambassador Payet about who they want to put in office and who they want to keep out on the street to continue the violent demonstrations that were going on. What is sometimes left out of the coverage, but is increasingly understood and known, is that this entire coup run by NATO and the Obama administration was in open support of Nazis, neo-Nazi forces, the people who openly praised the collaborators of Hitler back in the 1940s, who gathered up the Poles and the Jews for slaughter. And these are the people being heralded as heroes by these masked Molotov cocktail throwing terrorists on the streets of Ukraine. The intention here is to provoke a confrontation with Russia. We are on the brink of thermonuclear war. And if Obama is not removed from office, this week, or at least the process begun this week, to impeach this madman who is on the brink of bringing the world into a thermonuclear war that could exterminate the entire human race, trying to provoke Russia, which lost 20 million people in World War II fighting fascism, and is now watching NATO placing a fascist-run regime in power in Ukraine on their border, leaving Russia defenseless, while the U.S. is also placing missile systems all along the Russian border, which clearly are targeting a first strike capacity against Russia by putting in the ability to take out the second strike response. We are on the brink of a global thermonuclear war brought about by this madman in the White House and his supporters in NATO, who are trying to provoke Russia into taking some sort of action to justify what they plan as a nuclear assault against Russia, and potentially also against China, since, of course, you're dealing here with the entire Eurasian continent still believing in development and growth and progress, while the entire transatlantic is in a state of complete economic breakdown crisis. And it's that economic breakdown crisis driving these lunatics into trying to provoke a war with Eurasia, Russia and China especially, which they cannot allow to continue progressing and growing and having scientific development while we're shutting down our own economy, murdering our population with austerity and so forth. So we're in a showdown moment, which is going to be determined in the next hours and days. We're fully mobilized in the United States to get an impeachment process going this week against this madman, which is the only way we're going to stop this rush for a nuclear war.
How do you see the situation that's unfolding in Crimea region, in which you had some of the obviously pro-Russian nationals there seize the government building and the parliament building, I believe, there, raising Russia's flags? Do you see that separatist movement gaining momentum?
Well, I would not get focused on that kind of separatist movement. I would get focused on the fact that the Russians know they cannot lose their port at Sebastopol and Odessa. This is their access to the Mediterranean at a time where the West is running a threat of full-scale invasion against Syria. They're still potentially going to move on an attack on Iran, and they're trying to cut off Russia's access to the Mediterranean by basically shutting them out of their base at Sebastopol. So the attempt to provoke a crisis which would justify this war is what you have to focus on. And the only way to stop that is not to allow this insanity coming from Kerry and Hagel and everybody else in the West trying to say, oh, the Russians are threatening to intervene in Ukraine, after everybody knows that the U.S. and NATO just intervened in Ukraine, threw out a legitimate government, imposed a government which in fact does not run the demonstrations on the street. The demonstrations on the street are run by fo0d, by the right sector, by people praising their Nazi ancestors, and in fact using Nazi tactics to take over and destroy the country of Ukraine in general.
So are we looking at a repeat of the 2008 war, the Georgia war?
That's what they're trying to provoke, because this is not going to be a local war in Ukraine. If they can provoke a confrontation over Ukraine, you're talking about a Western alliance, which in the midst of the complete collapse of their financial empire, complete collapse going on right now, are prepared to go into a nuclear confrontation with Russia, not a local civil war situation in Ukraine. That's the excuse being set up. They want to have a confrontation. The Russians thus far, Putin is being very cautious. He's making it clear they cannot tolerate a fascist government in Ukraine. They're waiting to see what comes of this government that's being put together. But they are in a position where they're going to have to deal with the inability by them to allow a fascist government in Ukraine, NATO missiles perhaps on the border of Russia in Ukraine, right in the heart of the, basically right in the middle of Russia. And remember, Kiev was once the capital of Russia. Half that country was part of Russia. Crimea was Russia until, I think, 1954, when it was turned over to Ukraine, largely to counter the continuing Nazi forces in the western part of the government. In fact, the people around Stefan Bandera, who led the Nazi forces in collaboration with Hitler in the 1940s, why did he not go to Nuremberg trial? It's because he was picked up by British intelligence after the war, and they continued to use him in operations against Ukraine and against Russia. And it's that network which is being activated today.
Thank you very much for that.
To be stopped.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Mike Billington from the Executive Intelligence Review from Leesburg. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Well, starting off this hour, Australia is rolling out the red carpet for 200 U.S. Marines that arrived today. They are the first of the 2,500 soldiers expected in Darwin. The troops will be rotating in and out of the region every 6 months or so as part of an agreement by President Obama and Prime Minister Julia Gillard back in November. It's the latest move by the U.S. military to amp up its presence in the region and a major shift on the global geopolitical chessboard. The U.S., of course, has no issues with Australia. President Obama even went as far as to call the country one of America's closest allies. This does, however, demonstrate an ever-increasing American interest in the Pacific, but many are questioning the exact motives behind the move, and none are more critical than China. Dr. Pak Nung Wan explains why China is concerned about the developments.
I think the situation now has already caught the attention of the Chinese Communist Party in the past 3 months. As far as I have observed some signs of discussion and debate within the Chinese government. The Chinese government has started to gain some consensus, a perception that the U.S. and China relations is being positioned in a zero-sum game. Now, in this regard, it will have some very important implications of the change of Chinese foreign policy after Mr. Xi Jinping is going to step up as the president of China. Now, what would it be? I think is one of the possibilities is for the Chinese government for the future, apart from continue its resource-focused diplomacy and economic-oriented diplomatic and activities in the overseas, the Chinese government is going to consider to take a more assertive and more active position to try to influence the internal politics of other countries, number one. Number two, I think it's also for the Chinese government to consider to increase and to consider to increase its military presence in order to protect the kind of national interest that it has overseas.
So as you heard, China is certainly concerned over today's developments, and this comes as China itself looks to increase its presence in various parts of the Middle East. Currently, the country has its sights set on Pakistan. China already has a port in Gwadar that was built back in 2005. Last year, Pakistan asked China to build a naval base there and maintain a regular presence at the port. Now, China has denied the possibility of a naval base there, but this statement hasn't subdued fears from the U.S. and India, and the strategic importance of this port cannot be underestimated. It is quite close to the Strait of Hormuz, which is where 1/5 of the world's oil travels through, and it was the scene of a tense standoff between American and Iranian naval forces months ago after President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad threatened to shut the waterway down. And today's developments, along with China's interest in the region, shows how the chess pieces of these two global powers are slowly gravitating toward one another. We will continue to follow this story as it expands.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here! Visitors to Los Angeles will find countless movie studios, stars in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and a constant flow of Chinese tourists.
In Los Angeles, we are the city in the United States that more Chinese come to than in any other city in the States.
Mark Lieberman of the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board says there has been a steady increase in the number of Chinese tourists visiting Los Angeles. They are also touring San Francisco, New York, and Washington, D.C. More than 1 million Chinese tourists visited the United States last year, says economist Ferdinando Guerra.
It's a nearly 40% increase from 2010 to 2011.
LA-based Shine Tours, for example, has seen an almost 30% increase this year in tour groups from China, says company president Joseph Chi.
All the China passport holder, they thought the United States is their dream country like to visit.
The growth of China's middle class means more people can travel overseas. Like most Chinese tourists in the U.S., Liu Weiye came on a tour group.
The U.S. was established with a spirit of independence and competition. I wanted to come and take a look.
The number of Chinese tourists has been increasing steadily, but especially this year because the U.S. government streamlined the visa application process, says Stephen Cho of Universal Studios Hollywood.
From my perspective and from Universal Studios Hollywood, we're definitely looking for ways to really enhance the experience of the Chinese guests.
At Universal, there's a studio tour in Mandarin, led by Mandarin-speaking employees, and maps of the theme park in Chinese.
In addition to a Chinese pamphlet, Universal Studios Hollywood also has restaurants that not only serve burgers and fries, but also Chinese food.
The Montage Beverly Hills caters to its Chinese guests with Chinese tea in the hotel rooms, handwritten notes in Chinese, and Mandarin-speaking staff. Many of the hotel's Chinese clients shop on Rodeo Drive, famous for its luxury goods, says General Manager Herman Elger.
And our retail partners on Rodeo tell us that they are the largest segment of the shoppers as of this year.
The Chinese actually spend more than double the average international visitor in California.
Chinese tourists are contributing billions of dollars to the U.S. economy, which translates into more American jobs. The number of tourists from China is expected to double by 2016. Elizabeth Lee for VOA News, Los Angeles.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. The number of students from China studying at universities across the United States continues to increase. Some estimates say the number of undergraduate students from China in the United States has doubled in the last 2 years. Economists say the trend is largely caused by a growing middle class in China. Los Angeles County has one of the largest Chinese student populations in America, about 4,000 students. At the University of Southern California, students from China gather regularly for social events. One of the students says he has not met many Americans because there are so many students from China. He says this meant adjusting to life in the United States was easier. One international economist told VOA that Chinese students added more than $100 million to the economy of Los Angeles last year. He adds that across the country, Chinese students spend more than $4.5 billion every year. Economists say China's economic growth is behind the big increase in Chinese young people studying in the United States. One economist said that Chinese business leaders are now richer and can afford to send their children to study in America. In the past, Chinese students received scholarships to study in America. Today, many students, or at least their parents, pay their own expenses. And that is not the only change. The Dean of Religious Life at USC says Chinese students traditionally majored in engineering or science. Now, they are beginning to choose fields like business, education, or film. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
Now, an article appeared in the UK press recently extolling the purchasing power of Chinese shoppers and crediting them with boosting the economy of the capital city, London, during the recent Christmas sales. It said record numbers of shoppers from China spent on average £2,700. That's about $3,600 each in London. Now, high-end retailers like Selfridges saw thousands of Chinese lining up to get their hands on discounted luxury brands. Retail analysts in the UK said that despite the economic downturn globally, Chinese shoppers are spending more on luxury products than British shoppers. The tourists tend to focus on luxury brands like Gucci, Fendi and Louis Vuitton, which are cheaper in the UK anyway than in China, even when there aren't sales on. Well, this piece of news has been widely reported by Chinese media, and it stirred up quite a bit of discussion on the internet about the Chinese weakness for luxury products and also where all the cash to buy them comes from. So, for more details on the reaction to this massive shopping spree, let's cross over to the newsroom now, where our researcher Julia Liu has been following the chat. So, Julia, first of all, can you give us a brief idea of what's being said about this phenomenon?
Oh, well, first of all, I have to emphasize this is something that happened in another country, not in mainland China. And interestingly, this seems to have embarrassed many net users who feel a little ashamed about the display of conspicuous wealth. For this poster says on caixun.com, it seems that it's something that Chinese people should feel really proud of. Look how rich we are. But in fact, this is just an embarrassment that all foreigners will make fun of. Well, Ning Buxin says on Sina.com, I'd rather not buy under such circumstances, no matter how big the discount. I think the process of buying luxury products should be unhurried and graceful. I cannot see any grace in such people, even though they carry a Birkin bag. But of course, not all the net users agree. For example, Leopard Rabbit says on Weibo.com, I didn't actually go there, but it's just that I'm too lazy to line up. But I don't feel there's anything shameful about lining up to buy something I like. I believe that those who criticize people in the pictures are just jealous for not able to afford luxury products. And there are also some posters that mention another factor that may explain this craze. Zhang Zhengping says on ChinaNews.com, the biggest reason that these people buy luxury products abroad is tax. The same item can cost double in China after adding customs duty, consumption tax, and value-added tax. Oh, while Hey Pang Pang IZS thinks it's plain old business. Few of these Chinese people really buy the products for themselves. A lot of them actually sell the products to China to earn money from the price difference.
Okay, well, taxes and the price gap would certainly explain this spree in London. But, Julia, it has to be said, franchises selling these luxury brands are also here. They're popping up all over China, even in smaller towns. And they certainly seem to sell enough to survive. So it just can't be only the difference between prices.
Yes, Fergus, you're right. It certainly is a fact that many of these brand-name shops are opening up here, and they wouldn't do that unless it was worth their while. Here are a few figures to give you a general idea. According to a report by Bain & Company, the annual increase in consumption of luxury products is 8% internationally, 12% in the US, and just 6% in Europe. But in China, that figure is 30%. And what's more, China has already surpassed the US and in 2010 became the second largest consumer of luxury goods. And it's predicted that it will probably surpass Japan as #1 in a few years. Well, this has led to many questions online. This poster has this series of to-the-point questions on xinhuanet.com. How could the purchasing power be so strong in a country whose people's annual income is just 1/13 of Americans? And who's supporting this luxury products consumption? Do the people buy it out of the recognition of the brand or simply to show off? Well, first, who buys such products? The report we mentioned just now say that the bulk of people that buy luxury products in China are on average 25 years younger than those in the US, mainly around 25 to 28. And it seems some posters are pretty certain of who exactly these young people are. 反面教导员 says on Sina.com. There are two groups of people that buy luxury products in China. One is businessmen around 40 who are the first people to succeed in business after the reform and open policy. The other is the children of the rich families or officials. They are usually around their 20s and have studied abroad.
Okay, so if that's who the buyers are, is there any more about just why there's such an obsession to have these luxury products? What's the motive?
Yes, quite a bit. Well, one word that's frequently mentioned in all these posts is vanity. For example, Su says on Caixun.com, if you compare the consumption habits of foreigners and Chinese people, you see that foreigners are more concerned with quality and practicality of the products, while Chinese care more about the brand effect. They equate that famous brand with a symbol of social status. It's more for showing off for them to buy luxury products. Well, this poster has this analysis on the same website. China is in a period of rapid development of its economy. This leads to Chinese people to a stage of changing their ideas about consumption. Some nouveau rich people who are not confident of their social status are eager to find a way to prove their wealth. In a word, the consumption model is not natural enough, and it gives rise to people who rush to buy luxury products just to prove themselves. And then this poster identifies another group of brand consumers. Liang Xiaoyun says on Sina.com. There are some young white-collar workers who earn no more than $1,000 a month, but their closets are filled with Dior, Gucci, LV, and Burberry clothes and bags. It has a lot to do with coveting what their neighbors has. And in addition, the values of our society are complicated, and the value of the luxury brands is twisted in China already. Well, some posters mention another reason that may give rise to the brand fever. 中国海泰 says on Weibo.com. Chinese people believe strongly that courtesy demands a reciprocity, and gifts are usually needed in business occasions. Actually, half of these luxury goods are bought as presents. And finally, Bai Xiaofei says on CNJ.com, I sincerely hope that Chinese people don't just try to keep up with the US and Europe on a material level. Some psychological improvement is needed. People should not only know how to make money and how to spend money, but also how to be a responsible person.
Well, no arguing with that. Thanks for that, Julia.
This is in China, the world's longest and widest cable bridge, a 7-mile bridge, and obviously a lot of jobs have been created in this structure, and this, you know, and this is what things get done in China. Now, I'm not 100% sure how much investment should be made in this type of infrastructure, because I think we need to try and move away from cars. But still, it's a very amazing engineering achievement and compares extremely favorably with what the Americans are doing. To compare what's happening in America right now, we can view the following pictures. Oh dear, dear, dear. This is a symbolic picture of America today. Decaying infrastructure, focus is on war. The American government continue to make billions available for weapons of mass destruction, funding terrorism around the world, but there's no money for American infrastructure. America's roads, bridges are all decaying, and this is a fact. Anyone who's visited America can see just how poor the infrastructure is, and it's getting worse on a daily basis. A lot of the infrastructure is 100 years old, and to try and find a subway in New York that isn't covered in graffiti is almost impossible. And there just isn't enough. It's not even being maintained properly. And we will see far more examples of bridges collapsing, decaying infrastructure. It's not that America doesn't have the money, it's that the American government prefers to spend the money on war. They'd much rather spend billions on bombs to attack faraway countries than to spend the same amount of money improving the lives of American people. The truth of the matter is the American government doesn't care about American people. It just wants war, because the profits are far greater in war than they are in peace. For the elite few, these people who never fight themselves, they sit there watching television. For them it's just a game and they enjoy it. They get so excited by all the death and destruction these people cause. They love it. It's their world. And this is for the Americans who say that things in China collapse. As a matter of fact, it's things in America that collapse. America is going down the drain. Bush and Obama puppets have seen to that. Your democratic system has completely failed. Ron Paul offered you a possibility, but you rejected it, and you wanted more of the same. America, you're doomed. Thank you for listening.
China wants us to, how's this go, gets our house in order, and it's expressing concern for its 1.3 trillion of investments. What is that, in San Diego port they've leased for 100 years by Bill Clinton, or some kind of negotiations they made with Nixon way back when, or Project 60, which has been going on where they own a lot of lands. If they want their money, instead of taking it from us, the American people, go to where we send our money, to Israel. $3 billion a year for something that's, I don't know, it's not a very big place. So go take it from them, and that problem is now solved. We can quit sending my tax dollars and your tax dollars to Israel. Let them start being creative and motivated and start working for a change instead of sitting there and praying to some wall. I mean, we actually give each family, I think it's $22,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. Hello? We don't even get that. Some of us don't even get, well, I don't do taxes no more, but I've heard about people not even receiving their own, they've overpaid in taxes and don't even get their overpayment back, yet Israel's living off our dime. Anyway, I wanted to say something about the truckers too. The truckers say they're going to arrest the Congress peoples. Good job. And don't stop there. Senators, the Supreme Court justices, and everybody in that White House, everybody. Because until they can follow 10 basic rules of the Constitution, they all need to be arrested. And we, the people, try them. All of us try them. We will set all our differences aside. That means religious, color. That will mean sexual. Everything has to be laid aside. And you know what, Hollywood, you need to stay out of this, because you guys have been participating in a lot of little false flag things going on. Media needs to be shut down also. Until we can get some real journalists who can put up the real media, I say turn the TV off. We don't even own one, but I see what you guys put up, and you can tell, I mean, what? These people don't even age. I'm starting to suspect they're like little robots. But anyway, I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in that maybe we may stand a chance at changing things, and I'm really counting on that chance. I'm going to do my part. I hope you guys do too. And like I said, on any bill we pay now, we're scratching off the tax part, and we're just paying for what the cost of what it is we need, not paying any taxes. I hope you join in. And I love you all. And peace, love, and truth. And if you have any suggestions, leave them below, because I like hearing them. Although I'm not seeing them, they're not showing up. I have to literally go on my video to see your comments, thanks to ScrewTube. It doesn't show up that you've left me a comment. So I love you guys, and I'm out.
While Europe remains stuck in a financial crisis, luxury yacht makers are involved in a flourishing amount of projects for China's new rich class. At this year's Hong Kong International Boat Show, yacht makers from around the world are grinding it out for a piece of the pie. Let's take a look.
It seems the surge for flush Chinese shoppers has pried EU manufacturers away from their homeland and over to China itself. Stefano Rulaski explains why Chinese shoppers are willing to shell out for European boats.
People generally would like to have a product which is made in Europe, is willing to spend maybe a little bit more.
Their $2 million boat is made only for Chinese. Its exterior resembles a golden carp, a fish which symbolizes good fortune in China. According to the latest Hurun Wealth Report, the number of Chinese with a fortune above 100 million yuan has surpassed 63,000 and is growing with a yearly rate of 6%. Among them, 15% have plans to buy pleasure boats. But dealers say the Chinese mainland market is still in its infancy.
There's never been any pleasure boats in China previously in China's history. So this whole new rich man's toy, it's very, very new to them.
It wasn't new for them in ancient times, but not now. Analysts say most rich Chinese would rather buy high-end cars, Swiss watches, or traditional houses costing tens of millions like this one in downtown Beijing. Still, the dealers here in Hong Kong are confident of their business.
The mainlanders, they prefer to buy boats in Hong Kong so that they don't have to pay the 43.5% tax.
And they also say since there are few local competitors, now it's a good time to enter the Chinese market. Jane Chow, CCTV.
Dr. Hussein Badchi, thank you very much. Now, just how big of a surprise is this to Turkey's NATO allies?
First of all, of course, it is a big surprise for the NATO allies that Turkey has taken such a decision which changes the entire parameters until now. It's a paradigm shift in the decision-making process, but at the same time, a clear signal, clear message to the NATO members, to the United States in particular, that Turkey is not going to take any weapons now where Turkey is not part of the production process.
Well, can you just explain why there is this shift in attitude? After all, Turkey is part of NATO. Why would we want to upgrade its defense system and go to China and not the US?
There are two reasons for this. First of all, the American weapon system is always so that the Americans control the entire system if it is deployed. Whereas China is offering Turkey to produce together, even to control together, and provide Turkey alone control of the entire system. This is something new, and of course, this is a big project also for Turkish defense system. Turkey cannot rely always on patriots coming from Netherlands or from Germany. So if the crisis is over, then these two countries are taking their patriot defense systems away. So Turkey wants to get her own defense structure.
You talk about a crisis. What crisis? What's Turkey really worried about at the moment?
At the moment, of course, there is no big crisis which Turkey should be worried of. But you never know in the 21st century what is going on. If Iran is getting nuclear weapons, Syria is still a troubleshot, and Turkey wants to feel more secure.
But there are going to be high-level discussions, aren't there, between Turkey and the US? Do you think the US will be able to put pressure on Turkey to make it change its mind?
Yes, there are discussions like this. Turkey has to revise her decision. This is the view of American and European experts, and probably the Turkish government will, of course, negotiate this situation with the Americans. But the Americans have to make this concession that Turkey is taking part in the production mechanisms and process. Until now, it was always offset selling of the weapons, and in Turkey there was a new way of thinking, a new self-confidence that Turkey wants to be part of the entire process. Maybe this came as a surprise to NATO members and to America, but we may not forget that even Greece has some S-300 missiles which are Russian origin. So why Turkey should not have this? However, I'm very careful here that Turkey probably will take certain considerations, a revision probably of her decision. It is not a final decision yet.
But this does it not undermine the whole concept of the NATO alliance? It's quite a big blow to its trust, isn't it, just finally?
It is, indeed. Many voices in NATO circles say that Turkey should leave NATO if such a decision is going to be realized. But I don't think so that Turkey is leaving NATO because of this decision. The question is compatibility. If the system is compatible, then why not? I think in the European debate in particular, of course, that this decision of Turkey also giving a new understanding to some other NATO members. And China, of course, is the winner of the game. That China is now attracting countries like Turkey. Maybe some other countries will be also having influenced by this decision. We will see.
Okay, well, it's great to talk to you on this. Thank you so much. Dr. Hussein Bagchi, International Relations Professor, live here on RT. Thank you.
After 3 days at sea, aircraft Liaoning arrived at the military harbor in Sanya on Hainan Island. This is the Liaoning's first training voyage from the East China Sea to the South China Sea since it was commissioned by the Navy last year. The carrier was escorted by 2 guided missile destroyers, the Shenyang and the Jiazhuang, and 2 missile frigates, the Yantai and the Weifang.
We prepared well and the voyage was a success. The mission tested our plans, military capability and equipment. We gained experience and gathered data which will help future operations.
On Tuesday, the carrier left its home port of Qingdao in East China's Shandong province for the South China Sea. It passed through the Taiwan Strait on Thursday morning. After a stopover at Sanya military base in Hainan province, it's due to proceed with testing and training exercises. The vessel did not enter waters near the Diaoyu Islands, but the U.S. and Japan were on high alert. The 2 countries sent air and sea reconnaissance forces to observe the voyage. Analysts say that the U.S. was taking the opportunity to approach and detect China's aircraft carrier.
The U.S. and Japan took the Liaoning's training mission so seriously for 2 reasons. One is for detection and the other is to exaggerate the mission. The 2 countries keep a close eye on China's naval forces on each mission, so the Liaoning's on-time sea training is a good opportunity for them, and they're seizing it.
The U.S. George Washington and the U.S.'s Nimitz are both in the South China Sea, and Japan's Issei is also in the Philippines, where it went to help with rescue and relief after Typhoon Haiyan. That means there are now 4 aircraft carriers in the same sea area at the same time. Analysts say the U.S. is exaggerating a normal Chinese training mission for its own benefit. China's defense ministry says the mission is not aimed at any region or any country, and has nothing to do with the current international situation. Jin Yao, CCTV.
Cuba does have some oil production, though its small onshore deposits provide less than half of its energy needs. But offshore, they believe, they're sitting on vast reserves, enough to turn this communist-run island into a major regional exporter. This Chinese-built oil platform will arrive in Cuban waters shortly to start drilling the first exploratory wells.
We hope to drill several wells starting from the next year, and I am pretty sure we are going to have discoveries.
For Cuba's aging leadership, a major oil find would mean an end to relying on financial subsidies from allies to help keep the revolution alive. It's the anti-Castro Cuban-American lobby's worst nightmare. But there are also more pressing concerns. The drilling will take place out to sea, barely 80 kilometers, just 50 miles off the coast of Florida. And it's causing a major headache in the United States because if there were an accident, that's where the oil spill would wash ashore. And under the terms of the US trade embargo, no one there could come to Cuba's assistance. Last year's massive oil spill following the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster has left the Obama administration in a difficult position. An election is looming and the Cuban-American lobby wants action to stop the drilling taking place.
This is the report of the President's Oil Spill Commission.
Yet environmentalists and the oil industry want the US to work with the Cubans on safety issues.
Look, it's going to happen. They're going to drill for deep water oil, and they're going to probably find it. What the United States needs to do is prepare them to the extent we can for the kinds of things that people in the United States know, technologies we have to make sure that we're protected in the event of a spill. I like to say, let's make it Key West safe.
For the moment, it appears environmental concerns are taking precedence over politics. Some US cleanup firms will be allowed to operate in Cuban waters if needed. In return, American officials can conduct a safety inspection aboard the Chinese rig. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
2014. China draws on its seemingly unlimited resources and buys another American brand. Our persistent balance of trade deficit has sent trillions of dollars out of the country into foreign hands. It is no surprise that these dollars are coming back to buy us out. There is significant money to be made from the wealth-producing companies created by generations of American entrepreneurs. But with corporations and banks focusing on short-term profits, the game is being won by companies in other countries who focus on long-term profitability. Yesterday, it was announced that Google was going to sell Motorola to the Chinese firm f0od for $2.9 billion. This comes a year after Google bought the firm for over $12 billion, so they sold it at a loss. This was Google's largest ever acquisition, giving it the capacity to produce hardware alongside the current Android operating system. f0od's president said that they will immediately make f0od a strong global competitor in smartphones. There were two main factors behind the merger that are key to understanding why it unraveled. Google wanted to exert the same control over design and manufacturing as its Silicon Valley rival has over the iPhone. Google also knew of Motorola's deep patent portfolio and wanted to neutralize the threats of other tech companies were making towards the company. While it is good that these patents are remaining in the US, the concerning factor is that this is another brand sold off to China. This was one of the last US-owned smartphone brands, a growing market around the world. Now it is certain these products will be made in China, where they will be subsidized by their government and sold in the US. Continuing our long history of massive trade deficit, returning to buy up our corporations. We have no strategy as a nation. We are allowing our prosperity to be traded away and our best companies to come under foreign ownership. They then return it at a lower cost and continue the cycle which continues to cripple our economy. We must stop the great American sell-off. We cannot continue to allow our unfair trade policies to allow us to be.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be made and delivered to them over the next 5 years. Now, the company Alliant Tech Systems, or ATK, was awarded the contract to manufacture 40 caliber ammunition high-performance bullets. Apparently, these bullets, quote, provide optimum penetration for terminal performance. This refers to the way the tip of the bullet passes through barriers and expands, all the while holding its jacket in the toughest conditions. All right, so this is interesting because this is not the Pentagon making the order for the military. It's DHS and ICE. And to give you a little perspective here, there are only about 311 million people living in the entire country, so it begs the question, why such a massive order, 450 million bullets? David Seaman is a journalist and host of the DL Show. He's in our Miami studios, and I'm hoping might be able to give us a little perspective on this. David, why does the DHS need 450 million hollow point bullets?
Hi, Christine. Well, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, just to be clear with your viewers, consists of the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, and Immigration Services, among other divisions. So exactly, this is not the U.S. military. This is a domestic law enforcement agency, and the TSA are basically glorified bag screeners and airport screeners. That was their original congressional mandate, was to screen passengers before they get on an airplane. So the question really is, why do they need 450 million rounds of ammunition? And to be fair, some people online who don't want to believe what's going on have said that this is just going to be used for target practice, or also it could be that the government is simply stockpiling ammunition because they don't want to get into a situation where there's an ammo shortage and our law enforcement officers don't have any ammunition. And those are both fair points, but that kind of ammo that they purchased from ATK, hollow point ammunition, as you had explained, it's designed to, tear through human flesh and then expand. It's designed to kill people. This is not the optimal kind of ammo you would buy for target practice. It's more expensive, and it's more precise.
I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. And I'm wondering, too, I mean, certainly there are a lot of layers here when we talk about the DHS purchasing this. There's not really been sort of a concrete answer as to why. But I'm wondering if there's not, a larger discussion to be had here. I mean, we're seeing gun sales in the U.S. at an all-time high. We've already seen the DHS begin hiring armed security guards to protect federal buildings. Do you think this is a sign that they're preparing for some sort of mass civil unrest?
Well, the DHS, the people within it, TSA agents, they are not federal agents, so they're not as well trained, they're not as well vetted. These are the kinds of people who think that grandmothers and little children are a threat to national security when they go through an airport. And to give all of these agents so much firepower, it really does make you wonder if they know something that the American people do not know about. And they actually they have an open bid right now, DHS, for even more ammunition, for 175 million rounds of .223 caliber rifle ammo, which some people online have brought up as almost identical to the ammunition used by NATO peacekeeping forces. So that's very interesting. Are they planning on some kind of widespread economic unrest in the U.S. that would require NATO forces to help us out? I really don't know. But one thing I do know is that I don't like to inject my own opinion into these reports all the time, but if the Founding Fathers were alive today, they would be disgusted. We're rapidly militarizing our domestic law enforcement officers, and I think a lot of people are scared. TSA is scary enough. Wait until they all have guns. Well, I mean, you can't speak back when they're groping you at the airport.
TSA, I mean, as you say, they are part of the Department of Homeland Security. Certainly, the largest terrorist attack in our memorable history happened due to poor screening at airports, I guess you could say. But it is also Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. I mean, have you seen any indications that perhaps there's going to be a larger crackdown along this nation's borders? I mean, could that be part of it?
Certainly that's a possibility, although I don't see hundreds of millions of people flooding into America from Mexico or Canada anytime soon. The jobs that were once here are no longer here. I really don't understand it. I keep trying to put my head around it, and you try out different scenarios. Why do they need this much ammo? And certainly target practice is one option, but even if they're burning through 20 million rounds a month to train their agents, this is still overkill. This is still too much. So best case scenario, this is sort of a waste of taxpayers' money. And worst case scenario is, as you said, they're planning for economic unrest or violent protests, or something that requires hollow point ammunition on a wide scale. And some of the largest protests that we've seen certainly just happened in the last 6 months or so, the Occupy Wall Street protests. And, like you, David, I was kind of reading up on this, and there are a lot of theories as well that there's sort of a connection between DHS and the police forces in this country, particularly in the Occupy Wall Street crackdown. I know DHS agents, it's been confirmed, have been involved in various ways in many of the Occupy movements around the country. But I'm wondering what's going on in terms of, I mean, is there a line? Is that line now blurred between DHS and local and regional police forces? I think there has been, from what I've been reading online, there has been some federal involvement in local police crackdowns on peaceful protesters. And we're really seeing a shift where the government, both in the court of public opinion and in our laws, is trying to criminalize peaceful protesters and turn them into something more than what they actually are. When you have a bunch of college kids banging on drums and, asking for people to address issues like income inequality or the foreclosure crisis, those people are not really a threat to national security. And yet, the Department of Homeland Security, as I've seen online, they might be involved in some of the intelligence gathering. And it concerns me, and I think it concerns pretty much anybody out there who's seeing what's happening.
Certainly a lot of people concerned, and again, we still have no sort of confirmation as to exactly what these will be used for. Who knows if that will ever come out, but it's an interesting discussion. I think it's important for our viewers to see exactly what's going on here. Again, that this purchase was made not by the Pentagon, but by DHS for 450 million rounds of ammunition. David Seaman, journalist and host of The DL Show.
FEMA purchase orders for over $14.2 million for MREs and heater meals to be delivered to Region 3 by October 1st. FEMA purchase orders for 2 million pouches of emergency water to be delivered to FEMA Region 3 by October 1st. FEMA purchase orders for $13.6 million for MREs, and heater meals to be delivered to Austin by October 1st. 9-week training course for UN peacekeepers in CONUS to learn urban warfare. They're learning urban warfare, and they need to learn English and U.S. weapons systems. We're having foreign soldiers learn our U.S. weapons systems. This has been going on since the 4th week of July for 386,000 troops to be completed by October 1st. $11 million in antibiotics to be delivered to FEMA Region 3 by October 1st, ordered by the CDC. The World Health Organization held their second emergency meeting in its history. The second meeting in its entire history to discuss MERS coronavirus. Determined a vaccine must be in place by October 1st. 2,800 MRAPs must be delivered to DHS by October 1st. No leave will be allowed for U.S. military from September 28th through November 5th. NORCOM yearly training for civil unrest is to be suspended until September 27th to be performed in northeast coastal areas. Date for release of QE3 report is to be moved to October 16th. All DHS agents must qualify with sidearm, shotgun, and AR-15 by September 28th. No mention of yearly less lethal qualification. The sporadic testing of GPS and communication satellites is coordinated for the very first time ever, with a testing date of September 29th. POTUS mandates to FEMA and DHS concerning support for metropolitan communities dealing with the extreme climate change must be complete by October 1st. These mandates were issued during the last 3 weeks. Over 300 school systems in the U.S. have determined their 3-day kits for each school and 3-day kits for each student to take with them. All deliveries are scheduled for the month of September. All National Guard units will complete riot control and disaster assistance training during this year's annual 2-week training. All units must have their training complete by September 30th. Daily testing of emergency broadcast system to begin on September 25th and run through October 2nd. Eastern-based Coast Guard units to perform massive group training, usually performed in the Gulf, in the Virginia and Delaware areas. This is a 10-day training mission to begin September 26th. God, please help America. Sheldon R. Songstadt, Senator retired, South Dakota State.
When they raise the debt ceiling, because it confirms that we're going to have a lot more debt and a lot more money printing. So if they were not to raise the debt ceiling, which would certainly be in the best interest of the country, that type of event might be interpreted as being bearish for gold. But certainly clearing the path for additional debt and more money printing is exactly what the gold market wants.
Sure. So, do you think there's an actual chance that they do not raise the debt ceiling?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what's the snowball's chance in hell? I mean, it's a slim chance. They've raised it every time it's been approached. And many times there's a lot of political theater where they talk about not raising it, but they always do it. And, of course, the real crisis isn't the debt ceiling. It's the debt itself. The ceiling would limit the crisis, but they keep moving it. And, you know, when President Obama says that we have to raise the debt ceiling because America always pays its bills, he's wrong. The reason we have so much debt is because we never pay our bills. And the reason that we have to raise the debt ceiling is because we can't pay the bills. So we want to borrow more money instead. If we leave the debt ceiling alone, then we finally actually have to deal with the bills. And the problem is we've borrowed so much money, it's impossible to pay it back. And that's what the president doesn't want our creditors figuring out.
So, Peter, I'm wondering, I mean, we've been talking about the debt, it seems like forever, since the financial crisis, even before that, through the George W. Bush administration. What I'm trying to figure out is for gold prices, at what point does this mounting debt actually affect the trading of gold?
Well, I think it already has. If you've looked at how far gold prices have increased over the last decade or so, a lot of that is a function of the debt and the inflation that has accompanied the creation of all that debt. Certainly over the last couple of years, gold has retreated somewhat. And I think that had to do with the fact that so many speculators jumped on the gold trade after gold had made such a big move. And I think they lost patience over the summer this year, or maybe even rather in the spring, and everybody began to bail out of the trade. And so you had a lot of technical overhang, and you have a lot of negative sentiment now in the gold market, which I think is very misplaced, but ultimately very healthy for the long-term bull market, which I think is going to resume with a vengeance very soon.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, a lot of the analysts have been coming out, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and they've been cutting their price targets for year-end into 2014. I mean, you're obviously disagreeing with them. What do you see that they don't?
I see a lot of things that they don't, but they're basing this on three things that are not going to happen. They're saying that the U.S. has a viable recovery that's going to continue, that the Fed is going to stop the quantitative easing and begin tightening monetary policy, and that inflation is not a concern. They're wrong on all three. The U.S. economy is not really recovering. It's phony, and we're on the verge of another recession. The Fed is not about to taper or end QE. In fact, they're probably going to increase the amount of QE that they're providing into the system. And inflation is a problem, and it's going to get worse. So they've got it all wrong, so they're mispricing gold.
Right. Well, Peter, I mean, you mentioned inflation and that it's coming down the pipe, but so far, I mean, we have seen the Fed come out again and again and say inflation doesn't seem to be the trouble. In fact, if anything, there had been at one point a worry of deflation. So I'm trying to where does that come from?
Well, the Fed is lying. And first of all, deflation would not be a worry in the sense of falling prices, consumer prices. That's a good thing.
When you say the Fed's, what do you mean the Fed's lying?
Well, because the Fed has to create the false impression that there's no inflation because they have to validate their cheap money policy. If they acknowledged all the inflation that they've already created, they'd have to raise interest rates, but they can't without destroying the phony recovery that they helped create. So they have to deny the obvious. And it's amazing to me that so many people on Wall Street buy the Fed's propaganda, because if you actually look at what's happening to prices, they're rising pretty rapidly for just about everything that Americans buy. And of course, inflation by definition is the expansion of the money supply. That's exactly what the Fed is doing with quantitative easing. It is inflation simply by another term.
Well, it does seem that a lot of Wall Street does still focus on a core inflation rate, which is what most analysts continue to look at. Peter, I know you disagree with a lot on Wall Street. Some of your ideas might be a little bit different from others, but we do appreciate having you on and hope to have you back.
Hey, anytime.
All right. For The Street, I'm Joe Dell.
Matt, many friends here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm always happy to come to Washington. To be honest, always intimidated as the day began. Normally, I would prepare very thoroughly on everything that will be raised, on every issue I would want to cover, on the messages I want to bring to Washington. And very often on a whole subject the issue from A to Z, what I need to bring out. When I got here, the first thing I would learn is that what you want to talk about, nobody is interested here. Washington has its own ways, has its own agenda, has its own momentum about issues. And so you have to know how, when you come to Washington, and get on with the things you want to get on. And it is really a tremendously intellectually stimulating experience to be in Washington. Because you eventually, at the end of the day, you want to get through what you want to tell people. And it's a lot of hard work, my friends, but I always went away enriched. And the reason why is that you're willing to engage, you're willing to listen, you're eventually willing to listen, and I would go away wiser, and I hope, having listened to me, you will think this is worthwhile. So, but today I came not with just by myself. I came with a team of experts who actually know this subject a lot better than I do. So I hope you will enjoy listening to them, talking to them, asking questions, have communication. And I hope we all go away wealthier in terms of knowing how important US-China relationship has become and how important this economic relationship between the two countries is, and how much it not only can help to create economic vigor, economic opportunity, but also create millions of jobs for both countries. But more than that, such an economic relationship can really help US-China to move ahead on the overall relationship of these two countries. The United States and China are two very different countries with different histories and cultures. They are also at different stages of development, one being the largest developed nation and the other being the largest developing nation in the world, each of substantial economic size, and therefore each contribute to global economic activities in different ways. Working together, we can do more in such areas as global economic recovery and financial stability. Furthermore, US and China are the two largest trading nations in the world. Working together, we can help to further liberalize trade of goods and services around the world. The fact is, whether it is in energy security, food sufficiency, protection of the environment, climate change, and nuclear weapon proliferation, fighting terrorism, preventing epidemics or drug trafficking, all of these and other transnational challenges that the world faces today require multilateral efforts. But if US and China work together on any of these issues, the chances of success will be enhanced. It is for all the above reasons that from a global perspective, US-China relationship is the most important international relationship today. From a bilateral perspective, the economic relationship between the United States and China has developed over the past few decades from virtually non-existent. Henry Kissinger was saying to me yesterday, when they met early in 1971 in Beijing, the size of trade between China and the United States is smaller than the size of trade between the United States and El Salvador. And that was the relationship economic relationship at that time. But now, after a few decades, this relationship has developed from virtually non-existent to becoming a highly interdependent and mutually beneficial one. As the two largest trading nations in the world, they are also each other's second largest trading partners. A vast volume of trade in goods, integrated supply chain, a growing volume of trading services, substantial direct American investment in China, and an even larger Chinese investment in U.S. Treasury securities speak to the importance of the relationship. On balance, the relationship is of tremendous mutual benefit. But the question we want to ask today is, where is this economic relationship going in the future? To answer this question, the China-United States Exchange Foundation engaged a group of eminent scholars with advice from academics, business, political leaders from both countries to undertake a study to examine the economic relationship. The study reviewed the past, examined the difficulties in the economic relationship that could impede increasing commerce between them, but most importantly, look into the future. The study concluded, and you will hear many of this being presented to you, but it concluded that, here I quote, both countries want to establish a pattern of secure, high-quality, sustainable growth and employment for their people. And this study demonstrates that bilateral relationship, built and adapted over time, can make a material contribution to that shared goal. And there are many examples how US and China can cooperate with each other. But this is not my role to talk about it at this moment. What I do want to say to you is that you will enjoy listening to the presentation that is going to be made to you. I want you to really think about this. I hope we can at least give you some food for thought as to how important this economic relationship is. And also I want you to hopefully to think in terms of not only the economic opportunities and the job creation that can come about because of a better relationship economically, but how this better economic relationship can make a real difference to the overall relationship of the two countries, because that is really important. As Matt said early on, that relationship is really the most important relationship on earth. So if on a multilateral basis, there's reason for us to be together. On bilateral basis, there's reason for us to be together. Then there is no reason why we cannot get on with it. And I look forward to be sitting down there, listening to everybody, hearing your questions. And I'm sure after the lunch this afternoon, I will go away a wiser person and come back again to Washington with renewed energy to bang my head and to get things happen. Thank you very much.
Too powerful, too secret, too controversial, 100 years straight. 100 years ago, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, marking a pivotal point in America's monetary policy. No longer was Congress in control of the U.S. dollar as the Constitution stipulated. It had been delegated to a private institution.
It's been the most stupendous case of mission creep almost in the recorded history of government.
The Fed was the United States' third attempt to establish a central bank. Andrew Jackson abolished the second one, saying if Congress has the right under the Constitution to issue paper money, it was given them to use themselves, not to be delegated to individuals or corporations. Over the past century, operating under a veil of secrecy, the Federal Reserve has grown into arguably the most powerful financial institution in the world. The Fed is not fully audited, so there is much about it we may never know. Just a few years after its inception, the U.S. entered World War I.
The Fed was then given the authority to buy government debt. It helped finance the war. It became an agency of the government rather than a banker's bank.
But it was during the Vietnam War when President Richard Nixon opened up the present era of central banking.
At Camp David, in the infamous weekend, surrounded by a lot of so-called free market economists, he closed the gold window, severed the anchor to the dollar.
Since the end of the Bretton Woods system, the U.S. dollar has held no intrinsic value, leading to unconventional Fed policies such as quantitative easing, where they're buying unprecedented amounts of securities directly from the market. These are the same securities that helped lead to the crash of 2008. This will be the current Fed Chairman Bernanke's legacy.
He will be regarded as one of the most significant and, time will tell, of course, but perhaps successful Fed chairs in history.
Not everyone thinks this bond buying program will be beneficial in the long run, however.
Ironically, this is the greatest engine of reverse income distribution ever imagined. It's kind of an inverse Robin Hood policy.
And tell me who's benefiting from QE.
It's basically the 1%.
Even economists of opposite thought agree that QE is for Wall Street.
The immediate beneficiaries certainly are the financial institutions that are doing interbank lending.
Former Federal Reserve official Andrew Huszar called it the greatest backdoor Wall Street bailout of all time. But there's about to be a changing of the guard at the Fed. However, President Obama has nominated Janet Yellen, who is openly supportive of QE. So what does the future look like with her as the head?
I think we can safely say that the centrality of the economic position of the Fed is one that is more likely to increase than to decrease.
When the Federal Reserve began, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. Today, our currency has evolved into basically just sheets of paper that are only backed by the promise of the U.S. government. Only time will tell if all these promises can be kept. In Washington, D.C., Perry Ann Boring, RT.
India actually has already bought Iranian oil using gold instead of U.S. dollars. And this is extremely significant because every year India actually spends $12 billion U.S. dollars on Iranian oil. And now actually Beijing is also saying that it might want to jump on board with New Delhi and also look into some sort of agreement with Iran to continue to get oil. New Delhi and Beijing actually account for 40% of the imports of Iranian oil. The EU only counts for 20%. Obviously, we've been talking about all week about this oil embargo that the EU announced on Monday that they're hoping to roll out and put into place by July 1st. And obviously, if New Delhi and Beijing find a way to continue trading with Iran using gold instead of U.S. dollars, this would severely hurt what the European Union and Washington is trying to do. Russia has also said that it wants to continue trading with Iran using domestic currencies instead of U.S. dollars. Obviously, the point of the EU oil embargo would be to bring Iran back to the negotiations table over its nuclear program. Obviously, Iran has said consistently maintained that this is a peaceful nuclear program. The West believes that they are potentially developing nuclear weapons. So in response to the EU's announcement on Monday that it will place an oil embargo on Iran, Iran has said that it's going to shut the Strait of Hormuz, which is actually where 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply shuttles through. And the United States has said it will absolutely not allow that to happen, even sort of alluding to the fact that it could potentially use military force to make sure that that strait stays open. Moscow has also said that sanctions are an obsolete form of sort of of punishing a country and that it's actually going to be counterproductive. Another interesting thing to note here is that if Beijing and New Delhi continue to trade with Iran with gold, it's actually going to increase the value of gold and decrease the value of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency.
How it is being talked about in the news right now. So in this article about China's currency, the yuan, being up late on a stronger central bank guidance that was received and a weaker dollar abroad, the Wall Street Journal writes the yuan is up 4% against the dollar this year and 7.7% since June of 2010, when China ended its currency peg to the dollar and vowed to make the yuan more flexible. So there you see it. But what exactly is a currency peg? Well, it is a country's or government's exchange rate policy of pegging the central bank's exchange to another country's currency. So you may ask, what is the point of doing it? Well, here's the reasons why. If you peg a currency artificially high, it means you're a country that's trying to encourage foreign money to come into your economy. You're trying to attract capital. And if you peg your currency artificially low, it means that you're trying to encourage exports. You want your country, your industries to export more. Now, when a country pegs its currency artificially low, as is argued in the case of China currently, which still loosely pegs its currency to the dollar, the central bank has had to intervene in the markets, and it does this by buying up foreign currency and adding to its foreign currency reserves. As you can see, China's share of the world's foreign currency exchange reserves have certainly risen. Now, this also creates inflation domestically. And what happens when a country pegs its currency artificially high? Well, this happened in the case of Argentina, for example, prior to 2002. I'll get back to this chart, but basically the central bank has to intervene in the market by buying up its own currency with foreign exchange reserves. Now, let's look at how this can play out, and I want to continue to use this Argentina example. So Argentina originally pegged its currency, its peso, to the dollar in 1991. You can see this here. It's this flat line, but it eventually came unglued at the start of 2002 as people started dumping their pesos. Argentina, I think you probably know, is going through a tough time, going through a depression. The peso came under increasing pressure, and the government eventually had to stop intervening, allowing the dollar, you can see what it did, to appreciate very rapidly against the peso. This is the dollar's value shooting up relative to the peso. So this is how you can see the impact of what happens when a currency peg, isn't able to be maintained. So this has everything to do with trying to affect a country's exports and investments in relationship to other economies, which is why this becomes an international issue, much more complicated than I can explain in word of the day. But now you at least know basically what a currency peg is.
Elections, and we might get a president who will sign a simple repeal bill, and we won't have to worry about any of this stuff. If President Obama is reelected and Obamacare rolls out as the law is written today, and the Supreme Court gets it wrong and says that it's constitutional, that means that Obamacare is supreme. And the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. can dictate every regulation that your state health insurance exchange is going to be implementing. So it's an absolute myth that you can build some kind of firebreak or firewall or barrier.
The Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be made and delivered to them over the next 5 years. Now, the company Alliant Tech Systems, or ATK, was awarded the contract to manufacture .40 caliber ammunition high-performance bullets. Apparently, these bullets, quote, provide optimum penetration for terminal performance. This refers to the way the tip of the bullet passes through barriers and expands, all the while holding its jacket in the toughest conditions. All right, so this is interesting because this is not the Pentagon making the order for the military. It's DHS and ICE. And to give you a little perspective here, there are only about 311 million people living in the entire country. So it begs the question, why such a massive order, 450 million bullets? David Seaman is a journalist and host of the DL Show. He's in our Miami studios, and I'm hoping might be able to give us a little perspective on this. David, why does the DHS need 450 million hollow point bullets?
Hi, Christine. Well, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, just to be clear with your viewers, consists of the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, and Immigration Services, among other divisions. So exactly, this is not the U.S. military. This is a domestic law enforcement agency, and the TSA are basically glorified bag screeners and airport screeners. That was their original congressional mandate, was to screen passengers before they get on an airplane. So the question really is, why do they need 450 million rounds of ammunition? And to be fair, some people online who don't want to believe what's going on have said that this is just going to be used for target practice, or also it could be that the government is simply stockpiling ammunition because they don't want to get into a situation where there's an ammo shortage and our law enforcement officers don't have any ammunition. And those are both fair points. But that kind of ammo that they purchased from ATK, hollow point ammunition, as you had explained, it's designed to, tear through human flesh and then expand. It's designed to kill people. This is not the optimal kind of ammo you would buy for target practice. It's more expensive and it's more precise.
I think that's a really interesting point to bring up. And I'm wondering, too, I mean, certainly there are a lot of layers here when we talk about the DHS purchasing this. There's not really been sort of a concrete answer as to why. But I'm wondering if there's not, a larger discussion to be had here. I mean, we're seeing gun sales in the U.S. at an all-time high. We've already seen the DHS begin hiring armed security guards to protect federal buildings. Do you think this is a sign that they're preparing for some sort of mass civil unrest?
Well, the DHS, the people within it, TSA agents, they are not federal agents, so they're not as well trained, they're not as well vetted. These are the kinds of people who think that grandmothers and little children are a threat to national security when they go through an airport. And to give all of these agents so much firepower, it really does make you wonder if they know something that the American people do not know about. And they have an open bid right now, DHS, for even more ammunition, for 175 million rounds of .223 caliber rifle ammo, which some people online have brought up as almost identical to the ammunition used by NATO peacekeeping forces. So that's very interesting. Are they planning on some kind of widespread economic unrest in the U.S. that would require NATO forces to help us out? I really don't know. But one thing I do know is that I don't like to inject my own opinion into these reports all the time. But if the Founding Fathers were alive today, they would be disgusted. We're rapidly militarizing our domestic law enforcement officers. And, I think a lot of people are scared. TSA is scary enough. Wait until they all have guns.
Well,
and you can't speak back when they're groping you at the airport.
TSA, I mean, as you say, they are part of the Department of Homeland Security. Certainly the largest terrorist attack in our memorable history happened due to poor screening at airports, I guess you could say. But it is also immigrations and customs enforcement. I mean, have you seen any indications that perhaps there's going to be a larger crackdown along this nation's borders? I mean, could that be part of it?
Certainly that's a possibility, although I don't see hundreds of millions of people flooding into America from Mexico or Canada anytime soon. The jobs that were once here are no longer here. I really don't understand it. I keep trying to put my head around it, and you try out different scenarios. Why do they need this much ammo? And certainly target practice is one option, but even if they're burning through 20 million rounds a month to train their agents, this is still overkill. This is still too much. So best case scenario, this is sort of a waste of taxpayers' money. And worst case scenario is, as you said, they're planning for economic unrest or violent protests, or something that requires hollow point ammunition on a wide scale.
And some of the largest protests that we've seen certainly just happened in the last 6 months or so, the Occupy Wall Street protests. And, like you, David, I was kind of reading up on this, and there are a lot of theories as well that there's sort of a connection between DHS and the police forces in this country, particularly in the Occupy Wall Street crackdown. I know DHS agents, it's been confirmed, have been involved in various ways in many of the Occupy movements around the country. But I'm wondering what's going on in terms of, I mean, is there a line? Is that line now blurred between DHS and local and regional police forces?
I think there has been, from what I've been reading online, there has been some federal involvement in local police crackdowns on peaceful protesters. And we're really seeing a shift where the government, both in the court of public opinion and in our laws, is trying to criminalize peaceful protesters and turn them into something more than what they actually are. When you have a bunch of college kids banging on drums and, asking for people to address issues like income inequality or the foreclosure crisis, those people are not really a threat to national security. And yet, the Department of Homeland Security, as I've seen online, they might be involved in some of the intelligence gathering And it concerns me, and I think it concerns pretty much anybody out there who's seeing what's happening.
Certainly a lot of people concerned, and again, we still have no sort of confirmation as to exactly what these will be used for. Who knows if that will ever come out, but it's an interesting discussion. I think it's important for our viewers to see exactly what's going on here. Again, that this purchase was made not by the Pentagon, but by DHS for 450 million rounds of ammunition. David Seaman, journalist and host of The DL Show.
Chatty Dad 1 here, coming at you. Did you know that this is U.S. Critical Infrastructure Security Month? I did not know this. That's why we're having all this stuff going on. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And it's going to be going on all this month. I want to show you something. This came from FEMA announcing this from the White House. It's from October 31st. Presidential Proclamation. Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience Month 2013. By the President of the United States of America. A proclamation. I'm just going to skip down here. As President, I have made protecting critical infrastructure a top priority. Earlier this year, I signed a presidential policy directive to shore up our defense against physical and cyber incidents. In tandem with my executive order on cybersecurity. Hence why we have all this stuff going on the computer. This directive strengthens information sharing with my administration and between the federal government and its many critical infrastructure partners. Not just the government, its partners, while also ensuring storing privacy protections. While also ensuring strong privacy protections. Because of the interconnected nature of our critical infrastructure, my administration will continue to work with businesses and industry leaders to build on all the great work done to date with these partners and the cooperation with all levels of government. In cooperation with all levels of government, we will further enhance the security and resilience of our critical infrastructure. We must continue to strengthen our resilience in threats from all hazards, including terrorism, natural disasters, as well as cyber attacks. We must ensure that the federal government works with all critical infrastructure partners, including owners and operators, such as Google, YouTube, Facebook, all of those, to share information effectively, while jointly collaborating before, during, and after an incident. This includes working with infrastructure sector to harden their assets against extreme weather and other impacts of climate change. So you see, there's a reason for them to give us some extreme weather and throw more on there about climate change. Emerging as an evolving threat requires the engagement of our entire nation, from all levels of government to the private sector and the American people. This month, as we recognize this, safeguarding our critical infrastructure is an economic and security imperative. Let each of us do our part to build a more resilient nation. Now, therefore, I, Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, by virtue of authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, I hereby proclaim November 2013 as Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience Month. I call upon the people of the United States to recognize the importance of protecting our national resource and observe this month with appropriate events and training to enhance our national security. In witness thereof, I have hereunto sent my hand this 31st day of October in the year of our Lord 2013 of the independence of the United States of America, 238. The 238th. Okay. That's why DHS has ordered all this stuff. That's why we've had all this training going on. That's why we've had these Russian troops called in to strengthen our infrastructure. U.S. critical infrastructure. All of this stuff. It's already done, guys. It's already done. It's already in law. It's already passed. We've been living under it. We just didn't realize it. So, there's nothing left to do. There's nothing to protest except the atrocities of it. It's a done deal. Join them or fight them. GIS for Homeland Security. December is National Critical Infrastructure Protection Month. Oh, December too, huh? My gosh, it's going to be every friggin' month of the year. Wait and see. Wait and see. You hack somebody's computer system, you're going to be brought up on charges of threatening the infrastructure and security of this government. Watch and see. This is serious steps. They have dotted all of their I's and crossed all their T's on this one. Religious facilities. What the heck is this? Okay. Frontline Protective Services. I guess you can get you a little badge like this if you plan on joining them. Join in the fight to help keep our nation strong. See, they know they've incurred the wrath of the world. They know that the stuff is coming. They know what's going down. And they also know what they've caused and what's happening. So, gear up, get ready, do whatever you got to do. Who knows what you may be seen as? You may be seen as a threat to the infrastructure and security. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that this is more and more control given to the tyrannical government. And it's not a good thing. I don't care what you say or think or feel. This is not a good thing. DHS warns of Chinese infrastructure and security problems. Well, they've got them over here doing the Grid X thing, helping us. My gosh. Lord help us. Leaked preppers setup. And preppers, you're going to be seen as a threat. Yeah. We all probably are already. Yep. This is Chatty Dad 1. I hope everybody's well and enjoying this month of, you know, infrastructure and security. Don't be surprised if no matter whatever happens, don't be surprised at it, because it's all part of this whole month's plan. They're going to show the need for this thing, and they're going to show the need for this thing with a wrath, with a vengeance. And they're going to say, see, cyber attacks on critical U.S. infrastructure. Look at that. They're going to get in front of people, thousands and thousands of people, and throw up these kind of maps and statistics and this and that. And oh, look at here. Oh, look at here. We've got a cash machine that's just dispensed a bunch of money. Oh, that's a threat. It's done it on its own. We've got people making toxic chemicals, even though the United States is the biggest chemical weapons, biological weapons manufacturer in the world. All of the boats coming in are going to be checked out real good and hard. Anyway, this is what's going on. This is part of what's going on. This is part of GridX. I've seen other drills going on called X, such and such X drill going on. I mean, it's all over the place. Check it out. GridX, it's just part of it. This is Chatty Dad 1. God bless, good luck to us all. God help us all, please. We need it. We sure do need it. We need all the help we can get right now. The middle class is hanging on by the fingertips. And they're constantly stepping on them. This is Chatty Dad 1. Never give up your guns. Buy all the ammo you can. Over and out.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make
very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc-cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues. In 1972, after years of crime, poverty, and decline, the government destroyed the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. Lisa Zigman, News Channel 5, I-Team.
Now, the company U.S. Radium no longer exists. Martino Taylor has placed all of her research, including the declassified documents, online and will link you to that data at ksdk.com. Now, she will make all of her findings public tomorrow at St. Louis Community College Merrimack campus. In the meantime, if you remember the spraying, the I-Team's Lisa Zigman would like to hear from you. You can email her at lzigman@ksdk.com.